Okay, what if I told you that every time you speak, you aren't just, communicating ideas? You're literally physically printing reality. I mean, it sounds completely wild, right? But what if the sounds you're making aren't just these random evolutionary grunts we all just decided to agree on, but actual mathematical code that's executing in the real world? It totally sounds like science fiction. I get it. But today, we're going to explore a framework that suggests exactly that. So let's dive right into this with a quick physical demonstration. I want you to actually do something with me right now. Just close your lips and hum. Seriously, don't open your mouth. Just let that sound resonate. You feel that? That vibration trapped right behind your teeth, that sound, that's the letter M. Now really think about what you just did physically. You enclosed a space, you trapped the energy, and you basically created material resonance right there in your own flesh. And now think about the words that start with the sound. Matter, mass, mother, moon, mud, metal. Pretty much every language that has an M sound assigns it to some kind of material substance. Guys, this is not a coincidence. The literal physical act of closing your lips and resonating air actually is the act of creating material mass. Your mouth is basically demonstrating the exact meaning of the word literally as you're speaking it. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates this massive concept that ancient traditions have kind of been hinting at for millennia. As the author Peter Sunby so provocatively puts it, to spell a word is to cast a spell. Think about that. When you speak, you're literally executing 3D geometry inside your mouth. And when you write, you're just locking that geometry into a 2D symbol on a page. You aren't just running around labeling the world, you are actually architecting it. So welcome to this explainer on Meaning Un-confounded, Complete Unified Edition by Peter Sunby. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide for this today. We're going to unpack this really incredible comprehensive synthesis that just completely bridges linguistics, mathematics, psychology, and philosophy all together. We are basically going to decode the very architecture of reality itself and show you how you can take control of the code you're already running every single day. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the mathematical bedrock, then move into the Genesis stack and the consonant code itself. From there, we'll look at games and frozen postulates, institutional inversion, and finally, how we can go about unconfounding reality. All right, section 1, the mathematical bedrock. To really grasp this, we kind of have to take about 2,400 years of philosophy and just flip it completely on its head. See, for centuries, we've basically assumed that physical objects are base reality, right? And that math is just this handy human tool we invented to describe those objects. But let's look at a quick comparison here. Imagine a field, and in it there are 4 cows. The actual word cow is just a subjective label. It's a biological category that we humans basically invented and agreed upon. But the number 4? Now that is an objective truth. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4, whether humans are even around to agree on it or not. So the massive bedrock reframe here is that mathematics itself is the actual foundation of reality, and physical objects, well, they're simply the subjective downstream descriptions of those deeper mathematical truths. Moving on to section 2, the Genesis stack. So if math is the ultimate objective reality, how on earth do we get from that to the solid physical world we bump into every day? Well, the theory details this really fascinating 9-layer architecture, but let's just focus on the critical transition points for now. It all starts at the very top with pure life, or consciousness, which is the eternal foundation, mainly because absolute nothingness is literally a mathematical impossibility. Now, this consciousness generates what are called postulates. Think of these as fundamental source-level commands, big decisions about reality, like, let this be. And when these postulates start to interact with each other, they create quantities and structures, which is what gives us numbers and Boolean logic. And then finally, to actually render those mathematical commands into a physical interface, we get the consonant code. Yep, written letters and spoken sounds are literally the physical layer executing all that underlying mathematical logic. Which brings us right to section 3, the consonant code. This drops us directly into layer 8 of that stack, which is the interface you're using every single day. Let's revisit that first demonstration we did, but this time with a bit more context. When you make that M sound, you aren't just making a random noise. You are actually acting as a mechanical compiler. The geometry of your mouth is executing a very specific mathematical command. M represents primordial substance. Think about it. The sound continues from your lungs without stopping, but it gets bounded right there at your lips. It literally is material mass. And that is exactly why words like matter, mass, and mother are absolutely not arbitrary. They are mathematically precise descriptions of the physical action happening right there in your face. Now let's try applying this to another letter. Let's do the letter B. Try it out. Close your lips, let the air pressure build up right behind them, and then just release it in a little explosion. Buh. Right? What did you just do? You created a strict boundary, you filled it with energy, and then you broke it open. In this code, B means a bounded space with a purpose. Just think of the words for a second. Bucks, body, barn, border, bite, brain. Every single B word represents a space that is enclosed and purposefully built for whatever it contains. The physical action of your mouth is perfectly mirroring the exact reality the word describes. It's wild! Let's look at just one more really quick, the letter N. Touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth and release the air through your nose. Notice how the airflow doesn't stop? The physical geometry here dictates the meaning, which is ongoing flow or continuation. But here's the kicker. Position totally matters. At the start of a word, it can initiate that flow, like in now or name. If it's in the middle, it sustains the flow, like in running. And at the end, well, the flow has arrived. You're done. Or maybe they're just gone. The physical geometry is what's determining the literal meaning, and it changes precisely based on where it sits in that structural sequence. All right, let's zoom out a bit for section 4, games and frozen postulates. So we've got this incredible micro level code, right? But what actually happens when we scale this whole thing up to the macro level of human conflict and psychology? Well, in this framework, any sustained human interaction that requires effort is just called a game. And all games are structured by opposing postulates, basically opposing commands about reality. Now, every game has 4 main features. First, you have the must. This is something you feel is a genuine absolute necessity, something like, I must be respected. Second, and honestly this is the really vital one, is the must not, or what's called the hidden twin. This one runs completely silently right beneath the surface, like, I must not be discovered as a fraud. Third, you've got the opponent, the person or thing threatening your must. And fourth, the stakes. The huge takeaway here is that you can literally never resolve a conflict by only addressing that visible must. It's that invisible must not that acts as the anchor, locking the entire structure in place. So what exactly happens when a must and a must not violently collide and neither one can win? Well, the system logically just cannot process the paradox, so it freezes. Think about a time you had some seemingly pointless argument, like overloading the dishwasher or something, but your chest literally felt like it was in a vice. Guys, that is not a metaphor. According to this unified theory, that feeling is the literal physical manifestation of frozen mathematical code. It's called a twin insanity point mass, or TIM. Your physical body is quite literally the map of these frozen postulate collisions. And this scales up even further in section 5, institutional inversion. Because you see, this freezing, it doesn't just happen to individuals. It actually happens to massive organizations too. When institutions grow, they accumulate all these protocols and procedures, what you could call institutional mass. And then a pretty terrifying shift occurs. They invert. Just look at this comparison. A hospital's original prime postulate is obviously to heal. But over time, as it accumulates all that mass and thousands of staff whose livelihoods depend on it, it slowly adopts a hidden senior postulate, which is, this institution must survive. And here's the catch. For a hospital to continuously survive and grow, it structurally requires a steady, ongoing supply of sick people. It literally develops a hidden structural interest in making sure the very problem it was created to solve remains unsolved. And you see this everywhere. Law firms needing endless disputes, social media platforms needing chronic outrage. The underlying structure just completely traps the participants. Which leads us to our final part, section 6, un-confounding reality. So the big question, how on earth do we break out of these traps and actually dissolve all this frozen mass, both in our own bodies and in our institutions? Well, the most profound paradox here is that just intellectually understanding this explainer, that won't actually change your life. Intellectual understanding is really just the map. I mean, simply describing the architecture of a locked room doesn't magically open the door, right? To actually unfreeze the mass, you have to operate the mechanism. You have to physically execute the code using the 3D printer of your own body. You have to align your words, your syntax, and even your breathing to deliberately dissolve those hidden opposing postulates. So here are a few actionable steps you can use to start unconfounding your language and dissolving those psychological traps. First up, always identify the hidden twin. You have to stop fighting the visible must and dig down to find the must not that's actually anchoring it. Second, start converting verbs back to primary nouns. In this framework, verbs are often just illusions that hide reality. So instead of saying the government announces, you'd say the announcement by the government. It changes the whole geometry of the thought. Third, make your relationships explicit. Do not let language blur the lines of exactly who is doing what to whom. And finally, number 4, when it comes to institutions, we have to relentlessly separate the survival of the organization from its actual prime goal. When you actually start applying these lenses, something truly incredible happens. You just stop being a passive victim of some arbitrary universe. There's this quote from the text that I absolutely love. It says, "You are not a passenger on a random rock. You are a local author of the universal text." Let that sink in for a second. Your words are not just passive labels for reality. They are literal operations on reality. Every single time you speak with precision and without those hidden exclusions, you are actively increasing the coherency of the local reality right there around you. You are literally actively writing the universe. We've covered a lot of ground today, traveling from the mathematical bedrock through the actual physical geometry of your mouth, all the way up to the complex psychology of massive global institutions. The big takeaway here? The universe was not just created from nothing, it was written. It is built on a precise mathematical, architectural code, and you, right now, possess the exact 3D printer needed to compile it. The next iteration of all this is completely yours. So, my final question for you today is simply this: what will you write?